I want to start with City Council member Kshama Sawant, the Seattle Council member representing the 3rd District, a member of the Socialist Alternative Party and AFT 1789. Kshama Sawant, spelled KSHAMASAWANT.org, is her website. Vote Sawant, VOTESAWANT is the Twitter handle. And Council member Sawant, welcome back to the program. It's been, Jesus, seems like a year or so since we've talked.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and please call me Kshama.
Okay, Kshama, it's great having you back on the program. You have been, promoting a lot of really great policies in the Seattle City Council, including this head tax thing where, giant corporations actually may have to pay some small amount of the civic costs of caring for the infrastructure and whatnot that they're sucking up, and you're being rewarded for this apparently by, if the news stories I'm reading are correct, Amazon dropping just a little less than $1.5 million into local elections, much of it directed toward unseating you. Do I have that right?
That's absolutely right. That is unfortunately what's happening. As you said, Seattle is a wealthy city. It's unbelievably wealthy. Two of the richest two men in the world live in the Seattle area, and yet this city is experiencing the most unprecedented affordable housing and homelessness crisis. And that's, has a lot to do with the fact that Seattle and Washington State have the nation's most regressive tax system, meaning the poorer you are, a greater percentage of your income you pay in taxes. And if you're a big corporation, if you're a billionaire, you pay nothing. And in fact, you get back in subsidies. As you know, Trump's new tax cuts gave Amazon a $129 million tax subsidy. This is absolutely outrageous, but it also means it's a horrendous situation because we don't have resources for affordable housing. And it's also a giant indictment on corporate for-profit construction market. Construction has been booming in Seattle, and yet during the same period, rents have skyrocketed and housing has become less affordable, not more affordable. And so, we've been fighting for a very, very modest tax on the largest corporations like Amazon. And as you said correctly, Tom, they are absolutely going to war. The billionaires are going to war, and they have Amazon and Jeff Bezos are attempting to carry out a hostile corporate takeover of City Hall by attempting to buy this election and really subvert the democratic process.
It's pretty breathtaking, particularly when you consider that in 1917, during the Teddy Roosevelt administration, they passed the Tillman Act, which made it a federal felony for any corporation to support any candidate for federal office. Many states have had similar laws. Wisconsin's was probably the most well-known. It didn't get repealed until 1954. That said that any corporate officer, executive, or lawyer acting on behalf of a corporation who funneled money, anything of value, actually was the phrase, money, support, or anything of value to any candidate for elective office in the state of Wisconsin, faced 2 years in prison in addition to a fine. It's a very substantial fine. We used to have laws like this in virtually every state that forbade corporate activity. The Supreme Court knocked down most of those laws in 1976. Some of them that had just been passed the year before in the wake of the Nixon bribery scandals, in the decision called Buckley versus Vallejo. Then, they're saying that basically billionaires could support politicians because that was their free speech. Their money was speech. And then 2 years later, in the First National Bank case, they extended that logic to corporations. In 78, that opened the door, the floodgates for all the money that brought us Ronald Reagan and George Herbert Walker Bush as president, and that I would say put the Clinton administration big time in debt to some very, very wealthy people and large corporations. Is there any hope of pushing back against this, particularly given that the Supreme Court in 2010 and with Citizens United in 2013 with McCutcheon just doubled down on this and said, no, governments can't pass laws to stop billionaires or corporations from basically buying local or for that matter, even federal politics?
You're absolutely right. I mean, it's abysmal, the Supreme Court's track record on these and many other issues, and it is precisely because of the complete disaster that Citizens United is that corporations like Amazon, but not just Amazon, the whole corporate real estate lobby, other billionaires, multimillionaires, all the corporate executives, they are all, pumping money not only directly to my opponent's campaign, campaign coffers, but also to the corporate PACs. And as you said correctly, there's no limit against it. But I think the very fact that Amazon and the richest man in the world are going to war against ordinary people in Seattle and one socialist in City Hall, I think that itself is a reflection of how nervous they are, because they have seen what has happened when ordinary people get organized and, collectively build grassroots coalitions. They have their own elected voice through representatives like myself in City Hall, in the halls of government. You can actually make change possible that was, hitherto thought impossible. We won the $15 minimum wage. We have won landmark renters' rights victories. We have fought for, and the movement for taxing big business has tremendous support among ordinary people in my district, in citywide and region-wide. And the support, Tom, for rent control is incredible in this city right now. And we are building a very powerful movement for rent control, which is another reason why the corporate real estate lobby, all the hotel moguls, all of them are hand in glove with Amazon and Bezos in attempting to stop what's happening in Seattle. And the reason they're nervous is precisely because they have seen it is possible to win progressive victories when grassroots Democrats, socialists, ordinary people, union members, the labor movement, we get organized and collectively fight back. And they want to put a stop to it. And I think it's really important. I'm grateful that you're covering this on your program, because what happens in Seattle has so much at stake, not only for people in Seattle, but nationwide. People should be watching this, because what the election outcome on November 5th in Seattle has consequences for other cities as well, because Amazon and Bezos are using Seattle as a test lab. So if they succeed in straight up buying candidates and, buying City Hall and flipping City Hall to the right, then they're going to try it in other cities as well. It is going to have consequences for the presidential elections. And that's why it's really crucial that everybody who's listening to this, if you don't want corporations to just blatantly, brazenly subvert the democratic process, that you all support our efforts here.
Yeah, we're talking with Seattle City Council member Kshama Sawant, representing the 3rd District. Kshama, starts with a K, KSHAMASAWANT.org. KshamaSawant.org is her website. This is Kshama, this is my biggest fear. I live in Portland, as you know, and we are in the Washington State media market because Vancouver's right across the river from us. And I remember when Jay Inslee was promoting his carbon tax, and when that got first put in the ballot, as I recall, it was 2 years ago, it had something like 70% support. It had widespread support in Washington State. And it was on as a ballot referendum, and literally, sometimes 2-3 times an hour on MSNBC and CNN, and it's pretty much all I watch here, to the extent that I watch television in Portland, was this continuous ad by this guy who was doing this imitation of Mr. Rogers, this former Republican Secretary of State, saying, oh, yeah, we all think that, we need to get carbon emissions under control, but this will destroy the economy of Washington. And he was so nice, and he didn't reveal that he was a Republican and all this kind of stuff. And they poured so much money into that they ended up winning. The fossil fuel industry won. The ballot initiative went down in flames. I'm watching this happen all over the country, where elections are being bought, whether it's at the state level and all the efforts by the Kochs and ALEC and everything else. This is what they did in Wisconsin with Scott Walker. Are you sensing that there is an uprising, a mass movement, that people are waking up, or are we at risk of falling back to sleep again and just taking our information off? I'm sure they're running targeted Facebook ads as well, off Facebook and TV ads and things, and missing what's going on around us.
You're absolutely right that we have to be sober in assessing the forces that are arrayed against us. We don't have the billions of dollars that they have to spend on races around the nation. Yes, they are buying up Facebook ads. They're all kinds of television ads that are vilifying and demonizing me personally and also our movement. They're using racist and sexist tropes, the whole sort of, I'm an immigrant woman of color from India, so they're very freely using the subtext of the angry brown woman to try and attack our entire movement. And I see this as a conflict not just between me personally and Jeff Bezos, but a clash between billionaires who want to maintain a status quo of deep inequality, injustice, and a world that is on its way to climate catastrophe unless we take urgent and bold policy steps to avert the climate crisis. So these billionaires who want to maintain the status quo on one hand, and the vast majority of ordinary people on the other who want a different kind of society. And, in terms of your question, I don't think the outcome is inevitable one way or another. I think ultimately what history has shown, whether it was the fight for marriage equality, civil rights, women's rights, or it was more recently the $15 minimum wage and the renters' rights victories that we have won in Seattle, all of it shows that it is possible for ordinary people to really build power from below and overcome the balance of forces. New York State just did that. The upstate, downstate housing justice movement won incredible victories. The New York Times said that the real estate titans were stunned by the victories that ordinary people won. It can be done, but it's not inevitable. We need to get organized in order to make that possible.